We've already covered negative externalities for both production and consumption. If you haven't already watched those videos, go back and do that first, or else you'll be a little lost. So today, we're flipping the script. Instead of talking about markets that overproduce bad stuff, we're looking at markets that underproduce good stuff, positive production externalities. This is where firms create benefits for society that they don't get paid for. And because the market doesn't reward them for those extra benefits, guess what? Society ends up with less of the good than we actually want. That's classic market failure. Let's break it down. First of all, let's go over some examples of positive production externalities. Your economics teacher probably used an example of a beekeeper. The beekeeper takes care of the bees, but all they really care about is the honey the bees make. But in the process, the bees fly around and pollinate flowers and crops in the whole area, meaning that society benefits more than the private benefits of the individual beekeeper, who is the one who incurs the cost of taking care of the bees. But let's try to think of some better examples. Think about a firm that invests heavily to train its workers. The workers then gain new knowledge and skills that make them more productive. But chances are that most of those workers won't stay at that firm forever. Some of them will switch companies and work elsewhere. In doing so, they will bring with them the benefits gained from the training to their new company, which never paid for the cost of the training. This then has a multiplier effect, since other workers at the new firm will likely learn from the highly trained individual, and then they will go on to work at other companies, where they will then share their knowledge with others, who again never paid for the cost of the training. As you can see, the benefits gained by the private firm will be less than society, due to the costs incurred by the firm. This is a positive externality. In the previous video, we talked about how the different market-based policies aimed at correcting negative production externalities incentivized firms to find innovative ways to decrease their pollution. Let's suppose that one firm spent a lot of time and money on research and development and was finally able to discover a technological breakthrough that allowed them to drastically reduce their pollution output. As with our previous examples, as employees switched from one company to the next, they would also bring this innovation with them, and it would eventually spread to all companies in the industry, and the society would benefit greatly from such a large decrease in pollution. But it would all come from the resources spent by one individual firm. This is another example of a positive production externality. But these individual firms don't do this with the intention to benefit society. They only care about benefiting themselves. So just like with the negative externalities, the individual firms are only acting in their best interest. But that action has a spillover effect to the whole society. This is why it's an externality. Now, let's see what this looks like on a diagram. Here's our usual supply and demand diagram, which gives us the market price and quantity. Because we're talking about production, we're concerned with costs, which means the supply curve. This supply curve will represent the marginal private costs, which would be the costs incurred by the individual firm. As we discussed in our examples, society benefits more from these positive externalities. These external benefits offset the costs. Therefore, the marginal social cost is going to be less. So, we draw the MSC curve underneath the MPC curve. And because we're talking about production, the demand curve is equal to both the marginal private benefits and the marginal social benefits. The vertical distance between the two curves is equal to the external benefits. Now we can see that the socially optimum point, which is always found where MSC equals MSB, is here. From the diagram, we can see that the quantity the market is producing is less than the socially optimum quantity. In other words, society wants more, so we have an underallocation of resources to the production of the good. This means that there's going to be a social welfare loss because society isn't getting the amount that benefits it the most. So, let's try to identify the welfare loss area. Do you remember the cheat codes? The point of the triangle will always be at the socially optimum point. And remember, right is right and left is wrong. So for positive externalities, the triangle will point to the right. So this triangle here represents our welfare loss. And once again, the HL students will need to find the exact amount, which would be the base of the triangle times the height divided by 2. Easy. All right, so what can be done about it? Well, if the good or service is going to greatly benefit all of society, the government may decide to use its budget to produce and provide the good itself. This is called direct government provision. Think of public education, government-funded laboratories for research and development, even roads and bridges. These will all cause positive externalities, and almost every country in the world will spend government money to produce them because of the greater benefits gained by society. The other method to correct a positive production externality are subsidies. The subsidy gives money to the firm for each unit produced. This effectively lowers their cost of production, which enables them to produce more. Let's see what that looks like on a diagram. So even though these two methods work in different ways, they both have the same effect, which is to push the MPC curve downward closer to the MSC curve. For direct government provision, since the government is now producing the good service, the private firm doesn't need to produce as much, or possibly at all. This means lower costs of production for the private firm, which lowers the marginal private cost curve. Since subsidies also lower the production costs through money given to the private firm from the government, they also lower the marginal private cost curve. Either way, we can see that the market quantity then moves at least closer, if not all the way, to the socially optimum quantity. Remember, positive production externalities mean that the good is underproduced by the free market. So both direct government provision and subsidies try to correct the market failure by increasing production. Now, it's time for everyone's favorite part, the evaluation. First, the advantages. So, as we just discussed, both government provision and subsidies are very effective at lowering production costs and thus increasing the quantity produced, which is the main goal of correcting the externalities. This is highly effective for essential goods, and if they are provided for free or at least very cheap, like public education, it can help reduce inequality within the society. But of course, as you should know by now, no policy is perfect. So let's talk about the downsides. First of all, both of these methods use government funds. Since these funds could be used for many other things, there will always need to be choices made as to what those funds are used for, and then the opportunity costs that come with those choices. And as with all externalities, there is great difficulty in exactly measuring the external effects. Therefore, it is next to impossible for governments to judge which goods and services should be supported for extra production and the amount of support they should get. Obviously, the government can't support all goods and services, so the ones that are chosen and the amount of support they receive is highly politicized. This often causes governments to cater to political influences rather than objective economic goals. Therefore, in the real world, it is highly unlikely that governments will be able to completely close the gap between the marginal private costs and marginal social costs. However, the goal is to move the MSC curve down closer to the MSB curve, and society will gain at least some as a result. And that's all you need for positive production externalities. That wasn't so bad, was it? And that means we've only got one more lesson left in the externality series. So hang in there, we're almost done. Go ahead and check yourself on the learning objectives. And as always, thanks for watching. See you soon.